All right, so does society actually change enough? So we know that society changes. The life that people were leading in the 1950s is not the life that they're leading right now. The life that people are leading right now, the society we live in, is not going to be the society we're in the next 20 years. Especially these days, it seems like society is changing more rapidly than ever. So the question then becomes, is it changing enough? Right? Does society actually change enough to fundamentally change our behavior? So we're going to take a look at a few examples that I would argue indicate that yes, it is changing enough. And we're going to start off with a look at transhumanism. So transhumanism, this is a relatively new movement. Relatively new in terms of it being identified, but not relatively new in the terms that we've all sort of been part of transhumanism to varying degrees. But this is basically using technology to enhance human capacities. So if you store your friends' contact numbers on your cell phone rather than having them memorized in your brain, you are using technology to enhance your human capacities. You are part of this transhumanistic movement. We are reaching an age today where transhumanism is going to become a big kind of factor that can change our potential behavior. So, for example, does anybody know who this athlete is? His name is Oscar Pistorius. Does the name ring a bell? Yep.
Does he have not like mechanical legs, basically?
Yeah. So that's him right there. He is his nickname was the Blade Runner because he was a double amputee, and he would compete in track and field events. And he was called the Blade Runner because he ran on these blades. And he made headlines for two reasons. The good reason was, and you can Google the bad one, but the good reason was that he competed in the Paralympics, but his times in his events were fast enough that he actually qualified for the 2012, I believe, Olympics, like just straight Olympics, not Paralympics. Here he is running against people with normal legs. He almost was not allowed. So even though he had times that were fast enough to qualify for the Olympics, he was almost not allowed to compete in the Olympics. Does anybody know what the argument was against him competing in the Olympics? Can anybody guess? Mm-hmm.
His legs give him an unfair advantage.
The argument was that his legs were too good, that his legs were better than human legs were, and it gave him an unfair competitive advantage. That his legs were too springy, that they did not require as much metabolic energy because you don't have to pump blood to these robotic legs. You don't have to, waste calories to move them along. They basically made the argument, to put it in simple terms, that these legs were better than these legs, and that it was unfair of him to compete. Now, eventually he did compete, but the very fact that for the first time in our human existence, these transhumanism, technology augmented abilities of a human being were considered to be better than the actual physical human legs. That has not happened before. That is new territory that we're just diving into. And speaking of new territory, if you've ever seen Star Trek The Next Generation, you'll know this guy here. This is Geordi LaForge, and he is blind. He has, something was wrong with his eyes, so he's visually blind in his eyes, but his visual cortex is fine. So what he has is this visor implant, and the visor can analyze the electromagnetic spectrum and then translates it into electrical impulses that go directly into his brain. And in that way, he can see the world. And in reality, he can see better than any human. So he can see the infrared spectrum, he can see the ultraviolet spectrum. So many times they went on away missions, and Jordy, everybody would just look around the ship and they'd be like, oh yeah, this is fine. And Jordy would be like, oh no, I see structural damage everywhere and we have to get out of here. We got about 20 seconds before this place goes down. His vision was better than human vision. We're not quite there yet with this, but we are getting there with hearing. So this is a cochlear implant, and much like this visor that took visual information and changed it into electrical impulses that got fed directly into the cortex, this cochlear implant takes in auditory information, translates it into electrical impulses, and then sticks that directly into your cortex. And they actually have that for children as young as infants. So let's take a look at it in action. So this is a 8-month-old baby who was deaf. In this case, nothing is wrong with the brain, something is wrong with the ears, and this technology is bypassing the ears and going directly into the brain.
Here we go, it's coming back on, and he's back on again. See how he turned?
Hi, Jonathan.
Talk this second.
Hi. Good.
That
Could
was
you
really good.
hear that? Hi, sweetie. Could you hear that? Hi. Hi.
You got that, Dad, right?
Hi, Jonathan. Hi.
We call that a late Christmas present.
Hi. Good job.
That's really good.
All right, so we have the child has a cochlear implant, and it used to be science fiction. It's getting to be science fact, and the effect of this, once again, is going to be something that is new to psychology. The social effects of this are going to be something that's new to psychology. So just like Oscar Pistorius' legs were deemed to be too good to compete in the Olympics, they were unfair to compete in the Olympics. How long are we before enhancements like this are actually better than our own human auditory mechanisms? So just to kind of give you a kind of timeline, this is what our human ear looks like today, right? This is our human ear right now. And this is what cochlear implants look like today. So this is the state of technology in the current time. If you go back, let's be very generous. Let's say we go back 100 years. This is what the technology for helping somebody with a hearing impairment looked like. It was you put a cone to your ear and you asked people to speak directly into the cone. That's where the technology was. What were our ears like? That's what our ears were like. So notice, no change, right? In 100 years, our ears have gotten no better. In 100 years, this technology has changed into this technology. How much more time are we going to need before the trajectory of this technological revolution surpasses the ability of this listening device? So that is a question that we have not encountered yet, and it's also a question that really we have no. It's a social psychology question that we have no idea what's going to happen. So does anybody kind of can speculate in terms of what things are going to change if this cochlear implant just keeps getting better and better and better and better? So what are some of the things that might change? Mm-hmm.
People might start having them, like paying to have them implanted, for them to hear better, even if they can hear fine normally.
Right, so one thing that might change is that people might start equipping themselves with that, whether or not they have a hearing impairment. Because if you have the ability to hear better, just the same way that not being able to hear will impact your behavior and decrease your, for example, competitiveness in certain situations, being able to hear better would increase your competitiveness in certain situations. Be able to pick up on people's heartbeats, to know if they're lying or if they're not lying. Be able to pick up on people's breathing patterns, because you can hear them across the table in a negotiation situation. So being able to super perceive all of these indications, people would start getting these implants even if they didn't need them. The same way that years ago there was a sort of crisis of parents coaching their children to fake ADHD symptoms so that they can get prescribed Ritalin to turn a normal child into a super focused child so they can study 8 hours a day and get into Harvard without, paying the money in the admission scandal. But basically, that would be one of the things that occurs. Another thing that would occur, what would happen to privacy? What would happen to our society if literally I can hear everything that is going around? What's going to happen to divided attention? What's going to happen to stress levels if you can hear so much information, if you can't find a place of peace and quiet anymore? If going down the hallway you can hear nothing but conversations. Sure, you can turn it off, but how is that behavior going to affect us? And I will be honest with you, I don't think humans and people and scientists really understand how technology is going to affect us, because when the internet came out and everybody was like, oh my gosh, what's the internet going to do? How's the internet going to change us? How is, when cell phones came out, how are cell phones going to change us? How's all this going to change us? Not one psychologist, not one scientist, not one futurist made the prediction that we would become obsessed with cat videos and we would take photos of our food, right? Nobody predicted that. And yet here we are watching cat videos and posting it to Instagram every single meal that we've had for the last 5 years. So we don't know, we have no idea, but it's a social psychology question, and the society, the universe of social psychology is in for a drastic change.